My 8-year-old mute granddaughter pointed at my tea and said, "Don't drink it." I froze. She'd never spoken before. Then she looked me dead in the eye and kept going. My stomach dropped. I didn't panic. I did this. 7 days later, her mother went completely white because I wasn't the sweet, lonely grandma she thought she was drugging. Let me back up. My name is Patricia Morgan. I live in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, one of those neighborhoods where everyone waves, nobody actually knows anyone's last name, and the HOA will fine you for breathing too aggressively. I'm a widow, a homeowner, and, according to my daughter-in-law, apparently at that age. You know the tone. My son, Brian, is 34 and still thinks adulting is something you do between streaming subscriptions. He's a good man, soft around the edges, the kind of guy who'd apologize to a chair after bumping into it. His wife, Melissa, is also a kind of chair, the kind with spikes. Melissa is what I call Pinterest polite. Everything is love, sweetie. I just want what's best. And somehow you end up signing something you didn't read while she smiles like a Disney villain in yoga pants. They'd been married 6 years. 6 years of my son slowly shrinking in family photos. And then there was Nora, my granddaughter, 8 years old, big brown eyes, quiet as snowfall. The doctors had labeled her nonverbal early on. Developmental delays, anxiety, selective mutism, a whole list of words that basically meant she doesn't talk. And in our world, that was just Nora. Until that tea. It started with a vacation. Brian called me on a Tuesday night, voice bright in that overly cheerful way people get right before they ask for a favor. "Mom," he said, "Melissa and I found this deal for a resort in Florida. Like, ridiculous deal. We really need it. Just a week. Could you stay with Nora?" "Stay with her," I repeated, because apparently that needed clarification. "You mean, in your house, overnight. Me, the grandma. Just 7 days," he said quickly. "She'll be fine. She's used to you. Melissa already planned everything out." Of course she did. If Melissa planned a sneeze, she'd email you a color-coded schedule and ask you to sign a waiver. "Patricia," Melissa's voice slid into the call like perfume. "It'll be easy. I made a binder." "A binder? Of course." "Everything is labeled," she continued. "Meals, routines, therapies, emergency numbers, and I left you my special herbal tea. It's calming. It'll help you sleep." The way she said calming made my skin itch. But I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when you're dealing with someone who thinks manners are a weapon. "Sounds lovely," I said. "Perfect," Melissa chirped. "We leave Saturday morning." Saturday came. They pulled out of the driveway with suitcases and sunglasses like they were starring in a commercial. Melissa hugged Nora with dramatic intensity, like she was leaving for war. "Be good," she whispered to her, a little too close to her ear. Then she kissed her forehead and turned to me. "Patricia, don't forget the tea," she said, pressing a glass jar into my hands like it was sacred. "1 cup every night." The jar was filled with dried herbs, chamomile, lavender, something citrusy. It smelled fine. That's what made it worse. Brian hugged me, kissed my cheek. "Thanks, Mom. Seriously." And then they were gone. The house felt too quiet. Nora stood in the entryway, small and still, watching the taillights disappear. I crouched down. "Hey, Peanut," I said softly. "It's just us for a week, okay? We're going to be fine." Nora didn't respond. She rarely did, but she lifted her eyes to mine, sharp, alert, like she was holding a secret so heavy it bent her spine. I chalked it up to nerves. I shouldn't have. That first day was normal. Breakfast, cartoons, a little walk around the block. Nora stayed close to me like a shadow. Melissa texted constantly. Don't forget speech exercises. Limit sugar. Tea tonight. She likes her bath warm, not hot. And your tea. Yes, Melissa. My tea. Thank you for the reminder, Captain Control Freak. That night, after Nora's bath, I warmed up the kettle. The kitchen light hummed. The house creaked the way houses do when they're old and full of memories. I set 2 mugs on the counter, one for me, one for, well, mostly me. Nora never drank tea. I spooned the herbs into the strainer and poured the hot water. Steam curled up. It smelled like every self-care post on Instagram. Nora wandered in quietly, pajama sleeves pulled over her hands. She watched me with that same intense focus. I lifted the mug toward my lips. I took one small sip, barely enough to taste it. And Nora moved, fast. She reached up, small hand grabbing my wrist. Her grip was shockingly strong. Then she pointed at the tea, and she spoke. Clear, calm, like she'd been doing it her whole life. Don't drink it. I froze. Every muscle, every thought, everything. Because Nora didn't speak. Nora didn't whisper. She didn't hum. She didn't even make noise when she cried. And now she was looking at my mug like it was a loaded gun. What did you say? I breathed. Nora's eyes didn't flicker. Don't drink it, she repeated. She put something in it. She? My mouth felt dry. Melissa? Nora nodded once. My heart did something unpleasant in my chest, like it tried to crawl out through my throat. Sweetheart, I said slowly. How are you? I can talk, she said, like she was stating her shoe size. I just don't. Not when she's listening. The kettle clicked off behind us, a cheerful little sound that did not match the moment. I set the mug down carefully, like it might explode. Nora, I whispered, why didn't you tell me? Her face tightened. Her voice dropped. She said if I told, she'd send me back. My stomach turned. Back where? Nora swallowed. Back to foster care. Back to strangers. She said she'd call my old caseworker and tell them I'm broken, and they'd take me away again. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Because Nora wasn't Melissa's biological child. Nora had come into their lives through foster to adopt. A complicated story, a hard beginning, and Melissa was using that trauma like a leash. I took a breath, one of those deep breaths you take when you're trying not to scream. What did she put in the tea? I asked, voice steady. Nora shrugged, but there was something sickly practiced in it. Like she'd been forced to learn how to answer without saying too much. White powder, she said. She crushed it. I saw. She said it'll make you sleep. Then you'll get confused. Then you'll sign. Sign what? I asked. Nora stared at me, and for the first time I saw fear crack through her calm. Your house, she whispered. My blood went cold. Oh. So that was the game. Not calming tea, not helping Grandma sleep. This was a slow, polite robbery, and my daughter-in-law had apparently decided I was next. I should tell you I yelled, that I grabbed my phone and called Brian, demanded answers, threatened lawsuits, made dramatic speeches. I didn't, because panic makes you sloppy. And Melissa thrived on sloppy. So I did the one thing she would never expect from Patricia at that age. I smiled. I leaned down, kissed Nora's forehead, and said softly, Okay, thank you for telling me. Then I picked up my mug, and I walked to the sink. I dumped the tea down the drain like I was casually watering the pipes. Nora's shoulders loosened, just a little. Then I rinsed the mug. Calm. Normal. Grandma things. And when I turned back around, I kept my voice gentle. Sweetheart, I said, We're going to play a game this week, a grown-up game. Nora blinked. A game? Yes, I said. It's called Let Melissa Think She's Winning. Nora stared at me. Then, in the tiniest flicker of a moment, she almost smiled. Almost. That was enough. Step 1. I needed proof. Because in America, you can walk into a police station and say, "My daughter-in-law is drugging me." And they'll look at you like you just accused her of stealing your garden gnomes. Step 2. I needed Nora safe. Because if Melissa had threatened her into silence once, she'd do worse if she felt cornered. So I moved carefully, quietly, like someone setting a trap for a fox. I cleaned up the kitchen, tucked Nora into bed, and waited until the house was still. Then I opened Melissa's precious binder. The thing was thick enough to stop a bullet. Inside were schedules, meal plans, and a page titled Mom's Wellness Routine. Because, of course, that page had one item circled in pink. Herbal tea. Nightly, no exceptions. No exceptions. I took a photo of the page with my phone. Then I went to the pantry. Melissa had lined up supplies like a doomsday prepper, except instead of canned beans, it was gluten-free crackers and immune-boosting gummies. The tea jar sat front and center. I didn't touch it with my bare hands. Yes, I know that sounds dramatic. But when your daughter-in-law might be poisoning you, you develop a sudden respect for fingerprints. I grabbed a clean mason jar, poured a spoonful of the tea blend into it, sealed it, and labeled it with a Sharpie. Tea sample, Saturday. Then I took another photo. Then I texted Melissa, because I needed her to keep talking. Me. Nora's asleep. I'm having your tea now, so relaxing. Within 30 seconds. Melissa. Good. Make sure you drink the whole cup. Night, Patricia. Oh, Melissa. Thank you for putting your greed in writing. I slept poorly that night. Not because of sedatives, but because my brain wouldn't stop sprinting. By morning, I had a plan. First, the medical piece. I called my primary care office as soon as they opened. Dr. Miller's nurse, the voice answered. Hi, I said, keeping my tone light. This is Patricia Morgan. I need to come in today. Something urgent. There was a pause. Are you having chest pain? No, I said. I'm being potentially poisoned. Silence. Then, okay. Yes. Let's get you in. Bless that nurse. She didn't laugh. She didn't ask if I was watching too much true crime. She just moved. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a clinic room while Dr. Susan Miller, a sharp woman in her 50s who did not tolerate nonsense, looked at me over her glasses. You think someone is drugging you? She said. I think someone is putting something in my tea, I replied. Dr. Miller's eyebrow lifted. And you didn't drink it? Not more than a single sip before Nora stopped me, I said. But I want to know what it is. And I want it documented. Now here's the thing about doctors. Some will brush you off. Some will blame stress. Some will tell you to meditate. Dr. Miller? She leaned forward. Do you have the tea? She asked. I have a sample, I said. Good, she said briskly. We're doing labs, toxicology screen, and if anything shows up, I'm making a report. My throat tightened. Report to who? I asked. Adult Protective Services, she said plainly. This is elder abuse if it's real, and if it's not real, we'll still have your labs and your peace of mind. I nodded. Do it. They drew blood, took urine. The glamorous side of being a target, truly. On the way home, I stopped at a pharmacy and bought a small lockbox. Nora thought it was for treasure. In a way, it was. Back home, Nora sat at the kitchen table coloring while I called the second person on my list, an attorney. Not a, my friend's cousin does legal stuff attorney, a real one. James Whitman's office was downtown. His receptionist answered in that polished voice people get when they bill by the hour. "Whitman and Associates." "My name is Patricia Morgan," I said. "I need to speak to Mr. Whitman. It's about potential elder exploitation." There was a shift in tone immediately. "One moment, ma'am." James came on the line himself. "Ms. Morgan," he said calmly, "tell me what's going on." So I did. I told him about Melissa's tea, Nora's warning, the threat about foster care, the talk of signing over my house. And then I got quiet. "I need this to be real," I said. "I need it to hold up. Because if I accuse her and I'm wrong, I'm done. My son will never forgive me." James didn't rush me. He didn't speak down to me. He just listened. Then he said, "If you're right, your son will be grateful you saved him from her. If you're wrong, we'll still proceed carefully and protect you from retaliation. Either way, we document. We don't guess." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "What do I do?" I asked. "3 things," he said. 1. Don't confront her yet. 2. Preserve evidence, texts, samples, any written instructions. 3. Contact Adult Protective Services today. Not tomorrow. Today. I hesitated. "A P.S. Won't that blow things up?" "It starts a paper trail," he said. "And if there's a child involved who was threatened, you may also need a report with CPS. But let's start with APS. You can do this without creating a scene." Without creating a scene. That was my specialty. After I hung up, I looked at Nora. She was coloring a horse, very carefully, like she was trying to keep the world neat by keeping her crayon inside the lines. I sat beside her. "Hey," I said quietly. Nora didn't look up, but her shoulders tensed. "You were very brave last night," I said. Her hand paused. "She'll be mad," Nora whispered. "No," I said firmly. "She'll be caught. Those are different things." Nora's eyes flicked to mine. "What if she says I'm lying?" "She can say whatever she wants," I said. "But we're going to make sure people believe you." I could see the question trembling on her face. "Because you're going to tell them," I added gently. "Not in court, not in front of strangers yelling, but to someone whose whole job is listening to kids. Someone safe." Nora swallowed hard. Then she nodded. Day 2 was paperwork day. I called Adult Protective Services and made a report. The woman on the phone asked careful questions, like she'd heard this story 1,000 times, and that made my skin crawl. Because if she'd heard it 1,000 times, that meant Melissa wasn't some rare monster. She was a type. They gave me a case number. They told me not to confront Melissa. They told me to call 911 if I felt in immediate danger. They told me they would follow up. Then I called the local child advocacy center. I didn't even know those existed until that morning. The woman who answered was gentle but direct. "We can schedule a forensic interview," she said. "A trained interviewer will speak with Nora in a child-friendly setting. It's recorded. It can be used later if there's an investigation." Nora didn't flinch at the word recorded. She flinched at the word later. So I held her hand and said, "You're not alone." That afternoon, Melissa FaceTimed. Her skin was sun-kissed. Her hair was too perfect. She was wearing sunglasses inside like she was allergic to accountability. "Patricia," she sang. "How are my babies?" I angled the phone so she could see Nora sitting on the couch. Nora didn't look at the screen. Melissa's smile tightened slightly. "She's okay?" Melissa asked. "Great," I lied. "We're doing fine. I'm following your binder." Melissa beamed. "Perfect. And the tea?" "Oh, yes," I said, sweet as syrup. "Every night." Nora's fingers tightened around the cushion. I squeezed her shoulder gently. Melissa leaned closer to the camera. "Good. You know, At your age, sleep is so important. You can get confused when you don't rest. Ah, there it was. The seed. The little narrative she wanted planted. I smiled. You're right. It's been very calming. Melissa's eyes shone with satisfaction. After we hung up, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. But rage is fuel if you don't spill it too early. Day 3, Dr. Miller called. Patricia, she said, voice tight. Your labs are back. I sat down immediately. Nora was at the table eating apple slices. She watched me like she understood the gravity without needing the words. Dr. Miller didn't waste time. There's a sedative in your system, she said. Not a trace. Not maybe from a medication. It's there. And it's not something you should be taking. My mouth went numb. I only took one sip before Nora stopped me, I said. You've likely been exposed before, she replied. Or through food, or another drink. But Patricia, you were right to call. I closed my eyes. Because being right wasn't comforting. Being right meant Melissa had already been doing this. Dr. Miller continued, I'm filing a report. And I want you to stay with someone if possible. I can't, I said. Not yet. There was a pause. Then Dr. Miller's tone hardened. Then you lock your doors, she said. You tell me if you feel dizzy, and you do not. Do you hear me? Do not drink anything she prepares. I hear you, I said. After that call, I put the tea jar in the lockbox. Then I did something that felt surreal. I went online and ordered a small security camera set, one that could sit on a shelf in the kitchen and look like a normal gadget. 2-day shipping. Thank you, capitalism. Meanwhile, James Whitman sent me an email with a list of documents to gather. Deed to my home, any wills, any powers of attorney, bank statements. Because the truth is, if someone wants to exploit you, they don't start with a ski mask. They start with a family dinner. And a pen. That night, Nora and I ate mac and cheese because trauma deserves carbs. After dinner, she sat beside me on the couch, feet tucked under her, and whispered, She did it to Mrs. Keller. Who? I asked softly. Nora's voice was small. The lady at church. The one with the big hat. My heart sank. What happened? Nora picked at the seam of her pajama pants. Mom said she was helping her, Nora said. She'd bring groceries, make her tea, talk about paperwork. She said Mrs. Keller didn't know what she was signing. I swallowed. Did you see papers? Nora nodded. A folder. Mom said, if she signs the deed, we're done. The word deed came out of Nora's mouth like she'd memorized it. Like a child reciting something she didn't fully understand, but knew was dangerous. Where is Mrs. Keller now? I asked. Nora shrugged. Mom said she went to a facility. A facility. That's what people say when they don't want to say we took her freedom. I held Nora close. I wanted to promise her Melissa would never touch anyone again. But promises are cheap. Proof is expensive. So on day 4, Nora and I went to the Child Advocacy Center. It didn't look like a government building. It looked like a small house painted in cheerful colors. Inside, there were toys, soft chairs, a fish tank bubbling quietly. Nora clutched my hand like it was a lifeline. A woman introduced herself as an interviewer. She spoke to Nora like she mattered, like her words were valuable, not inconvenient. I didn't get to sit in the room. They explained that was important. No pressure, no coaching, no influence. So I waited in a separate area, staring at a wall poster that said, "You are safe here." I almost laughed at the irony, because safe wasn't a place. Safe was a battle. After an hour, Nora came out looking drained but lighter. like she'd been carrying a boulder and finally set it down. The interviewer came out afterward and said quietly, "Thank you for bringing her. We'll be forwarding this to the appropriate agencies." "Is she believed?" I asked. The woman's gaze was steady. "We take children seriously here." I blinked back tears. "Good," I whispered, "because I plan to take this all the way." Day 5, the cameras arrived. I installed one in the kitchen and one in the living room. Nora watched me with fascination. "It's like spy stuff," she whispered. "It is spy stuff," I said. "But the boring kind. The kind where the spy wears reading glasses and mutters about Wi-Fi." That afternoon, Melissa called again. She sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. "Patricia," she said, "I just wanted to check in. Are you feeling okay? You sounded tired last time." I leaned into the phone like I was confiding a secret. "Oh, I've been so sleepy," I said. "I guess your tea really works." Melissa hummed happily. "See? I told you, some people just need help regulating. At your age, the mind can slip." There it was again. Slip. Confusion. Her narrative was building. I kept my voice soft. "It's strange, though," I added. "Sometimes I can't remember if I took my vitamins." Melissa laughed lightly. "Oh, that happens." Nora sat across the room, eyes wide. I gave her a tiny nod. I put the call on speaker and set the phone under the kitchen camera. The camera caught everything. After the call, I texted James. "She's fishing for signs of confusion. I have recordings." He replied, "Good. Keep her talking. Also, APS is coordinating with law enforcement. Don't meet her alone when she returns." Day 6, APS called me back. A caseworker asked questions. Calm, methodical questions. Did Melissa have access to my finances? Did she have keys? Had she ever pressured me to sign anything? Did I have any cognitive diagnoses? Was Nora safe? I answered everything honestly. Then the caseworker said, "We're escalating this. A detective may contact you." My hands went cold again. Because escalation meant reality, it meant this wasn't just family drama. This was crime. That night, Nora couldn't sleep. She crawled into bed beside me, small and rigid, like she didn't know how to relax in peace. "She's coming tomorrow," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "What if she gets mad?" Nora asked. I stared at the ceiling and said quietly, "Then she should have picked a different hobby." Nora let out a tiny breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Then she whispered, "When she gets mad, she smiles first." That sentence broke something in me, because no child should know that kind of pattern. So I kissed Nora's forehead and said, "Tomorrow, you stay behind me. You don't have to be brave again. You already did the hardest part." Nora's voice was barely audible. "Talking?" "Yes," I whispered. "Talking." Day 7, the day Melissa came home. I woke up early, made pancakes, because I am, at my core, still a grandmother with a flair for domestic irony. I dressed like I was going to a normal family brunch, not like I was setting up an arrest. My phone buzzed. "Brian. Landing soon. See you in a few hours. Love you." I stared at the message, and for a brief moment, grief washed over me. Because Brian didn't know. He thought this was just a vacation and a grateful mom, and I was about to tear his life in half. But then I remembered Nora's words. "She smiles first." And I hardened. Late afternoon, their car pulled into the driveway. Nora stood by the window, shaking slightly. I put a hand on her shoulder. "Breathe," I said. "You're safe." The front door opened. Melissa entered first, sunglasses pushed up, skin glowing, energy loud. "Home sweet home," she declared. Brian followed with bags, looking tired but happy. "Mom," he said, grinning. How'd it go? It went, I said, smiling. Melissa swept toward me and hugged me dramatically. I patted her back like you pat a stranger's dog. Then she pulled away and immediately scanned my face. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Looking for what? Droopy eyelids? Slurred speech? Confusion? I gave her none of it. Oh! Melissa clapped her hands. Patricia, I almost forgot. While we were away, I spoke to someone about your situation. My situation. I found this great financial planner, she continued, too bright. He said we should get some paperwork in place, just in case you ever get overwhelmed. Brian frowned. Melissa, it's fine, she cut in sweetly. It's just responsible. Patricia, you know how it is. You don't want to burden Brian. Oh, the guilt angle. Classic. Melissa set a folder on the table like she was presenting dessert. There's a power of attorney, she said, and some forms related to the house. Nothing scary, just signatures. I looked at the folder, then I looked at her, and I smiled. Sure, I said. Let's talk. Melissa's shoulders relaxed. She thought she was winning. Brian looked uneasy. Mom, you don't have to sign anything if you don't want to. I placed my hand over his. I know, I said gently. But I do want to hear what Melissa has to say. Melissa beamed. Sit, she said, pulling out a chair for me like she was hosting a talk show. Nora hovered behind me, silent. Melissa glanced at her. Go play, Nora. Nora didn't move. Melissa's smile tightened. Nora? Nora's small hand slid into mine. I squeezed back. Okay, I said lightly. Walk me through it, Melissa. Melissa opened the folder and began speaking quickly, confidently, too confidently, like someone repeating a script. This is just so we can help you with bills if you get confused, she said. And this one is about the house deed, just a transfer to the family trust. It's normal. Everyone does it. Everyone does it. Sure. I leaned in. And what about the tea? I asked suddenly. Melissa blinked. What? The tea, I repeated, still smiling. The calming tea you insisted I drink every night. No exceptions. Brian looked between us. Tea? Melissa laughed. Oh my God, Patricia, are we really doing this? I tilted my head. Doing what? This paranoia, she said, her voice syrupy but sharp underneath. You always get dramatic. Brian's brow furrowed. Mom, what's going on? I didn't answer him yet. I looked at Nora. Nora's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. I nodded once. Nora took a breath, and then my granddaughter, my silent, nonverbal little girl, spoke again, right there in the kitchen, in front of her parents. She put medicine in it, Nora said clearly. She told me not to tell. She said if I did, I'd go back. The room snapped into silence. Brian's mouth fell open. Nora, you... Melissa went still. Not angry, not defensive, just frozen, like her brain had hit a wall. And then slowly, her face went completely white, because she realized something. Nora wasn't a quiet little prop anymore. She was a witness. Melissa's lips parted. Nora, honey, no, Nora said, voice shaking now but still loud enough. You said Grandma would get confused and sign. You said I had to keep my mouth shut. Brian turned to Melissa, disbelief twisting into horror. Melissa, what is she talking about? Melissa's eyes darted to me. Patricia, you coached her. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. Oh, Melissa, I said, you really think I'm organized enough to coach a child? I can barely coach myself into drinking enough water. Melissa's jaw tightened. This is insane. Is it? I asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Because I have your texts, I said softly, telling me to drink the whole cup. Every night. No exceptions. Brian's face tightened. Melissa, why would you? And I have lab results, I continued, voice calm, showing a sedative in my system. Melissa's eyes widened. For the first time, she looked scared. Brian whispered, What? And, I added, I have audio from my home security camera. Melissa's head snapped up. You recorded me? I tapped my screen, and the room filled with her own voice. At your age, the mind can slip. You can get confused. That happens. Melissa lunged toward me instinctively, like she wanted to snatch the phone. But she stopped. Because there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp knocks. I didn't move. Brian looked confused. Who is that? Melissa's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me, and I saw it. The calculation. The sudden realization that this was bigger than family. I walked to the door and opened it. A uniformed officer stood on my porch beside a woman holding a badge and a clipboard. Ms. Morgan? The woman asked. Yes, I said. I'm with Adult Protective Services, she said. And this is Detective... Melissa made a sound behind me. A thin, strangled inhale. The detective stepped forward. Ma'am, we need to speak with you. Brian looked like he might faint. Mom, he whispered. What did you do? I turned to him, eyes stinging. I protected us, I said quietly. I protected Nora. Melissa backed up a step. This is ridiculous. You can't. The detective's voice was firm. Melissa, we have a report. We have medical documentation, and we have reason to believe you attempted to exploit an elderly person financially and potentially administered a controlled substance without consent. Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked at Brian. She expected him to fix it, because Brian always fixed it. But Brian's face had changed. His softness was gone. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time and hating what he saw. No, he said hoarsely. No, you wouldn't. Melissa's eyes filled instantly, fake tears, perfectly timed. Brian, she whispered. She's lying. She's turning you against me. Brian's voice shook. Nora just spoke. For the first time. And the first thing she did was warn my mom. Melissa's tears faltered. Because she didn't have a script for that. The detective asked her to step outside. Melissa resisted at first, then tried to switch tactics, crying, bargaining, blaming me, blaming stress, blaming misunderstandings. But when the caseworker mentioned Nora's interview at the advocacy center, Melissa's face collapsed. Because she hadn't expected that. She'd expected silence. And now the silence was gone. Brian sank into a chair, head in his hands. Nora stood behind me, trembling. I wrapped an arm around her. I'm sorry, Brian whispered, voice cracking. Mom, I'm so sorry. I kissed the top of his head like he was 8 years old again. I know, I said softly. I know you didn't see it. Outside, Melissa's voice rose, sharp, desperate. Then it cut off, and the world went strangely quiet. That night, Nora and I slept at my house. Not Brian's, mine. Because I wasn't letting anyone move Nora around like luggage again. With James's help, I filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship. APS backed the request. The detective took my statement. Dr. Miller's report went into the file. James Whitman worked like a machine. Within 48 hours, I had temporary emergency guardianship while the court sorted out the mess. Brian stayed in the picture, of course. He wasn't the villain. He was the guy who married one, and he had to live with that. Melissa was charged. And once the investigation opened, other names surfaced. Mrs. Keller and 2 others. Patterns. Paper trails. Quiet elderly people whose families had questions and no answers. Melissa had built a whole little side hustle out of smiling and helping, and now that hustle was over. Weeks later, Nora sat at my kitchen table sipping cocoa. Real cocoa. No calming anything. She looked up at me and said softly, "Grandma?" I froze again. Not from fear this time. From awe. "Yes, baby." "I'm glad you didn't drink it," she said. I walked over and hugged her. "Me too," I whispered. "I'm very glad." Nora's voice trembled. "Do you think I can talk more now?" I pulled back and looked at her face. "You can do whatever you want," I said. "And anyone who tries to take your voice away again is going to have to go through me." Nora blinked slowly, like she was trying to believe that. Then she nodded, and she smiled. A real smile. Not the kind you do right before you hurt someone. The kind you do when you finally feel safe. Do you know what the funny part is? Melissa thought the tea was the weapon, but the real weapon was Nora's voice. All I did was make sure she got to use it. And if you're wondering what happened to the tea, I kept the jar. Not because I'm sentimental, because I'm a grandmother, and when someone tries to poison you in your own kitchen, you don't forget. You document. You lock your doors, and you make sure they never get a second cup. So what do you think? Did I go too far, or not far enough? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more.